Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video.
Good morning, everyone. I have 10:05, so I think we'll go ahead and get started if we can and let the rest of the people join as they come on. My name is Tom Bond, and I will be the moderator today. I will monitor the chat box and compile your questions for the Q&A part of this presentation at the end of Ira's talk. The program is being recorded and will be posted on the Prince William Master Gardeners YouTube. Please stay muted during the program to save bandwidth since we've got a large crowd. Today's program is co-sponsored by Prince William Master Gardeners and Virginia Master Gardener Association Education Committee. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori Redfern to introduce today's speaker.
Hi, I'm Lori Redfern, and on the Education Committee of the Prince William Master Gardeners. And I'm so happy to have Ira Wallace as our resident expert today. I met her 6 years ago at Master Gardener College when her first book had just been published. She is a Central Virginia Master Gardener and now author of several books, including today's topic, Grow Great Vegetables in Virginia. Ira has been highlighted in a new book, The Earth in Her Hands, 75 Extraordinary Women Working in the World of Plants. It was there that I learned her base of operations at Acorn Community Farm is 60 acres. It's the home of Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, which offers over 700 varieties of open-pollinated, heirloom, and organic seeds selected for flavor and regional adaptability. With the growing Eat Local movement and hearing more about food as medicine, Ira is the woman we want to learn from to improve our success in the sometimes challenging Virginia climate. If we were meeting in person, there would be a loud round of applause for you. So please imagine that and take it away, Ira.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm so glad to be here to share with you a few tips about how to grow these lovely Virginia vegetables. And I know a lot of people are new to gardening just from talking to people on the Southern Exposure line. So we're going to cover basics and new tips. And we're going to throw in some great varieties to inspire you in your garden. And we'll see how we make it. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. This is some information that I put here to get you to know things that you want to know about where you're gardening in particular. And this is like from our farm here in Mineral, Virginia. And it really helps you to sort of dig into it. And you know, if you have trouble finding it, your local master gardeners have a help desk, and someone can look those things up for you and help you fill it out in your notebook. Oh no. Okay. Here, we're going to start out with a little inspiration. Some of my favorite varieties of tomatoes. And did you know that tomatoes are the #1 home garden vegetable? And we like these big beefsteak slicers. But in the middle of the summer, if you want to have nice tomatoes, you might also want to grow some small and medium-sized ones as well. Peppers are another real favorite, and these are ones that were winners in the raw taste test at the Heritage Festival at Monticello, which we hope we'll get to have again someday in the near future. Beans are something that we grow a lot of, and when you see all the trellises, I thought I'd tempt you with some of the ones that we particularly like. We like Dean's purple pole beans. What turned me on to really liking purple pole beans is coming up into Mark Schoenbeck's garden, where there was a scene of devastation. All the beans were eaten up by Mexican bean beetles, except the Dean's purple pole beans. And in general, purple pole beans will survive better if you're having bean beetle problems. If you buy and release petio wasps at the first sign of bean beetles, that'll help all your beans survive better. Melons are really lovely. And our friend Pam Dolling at Twin Oaks Community has selected Crimson Sweet Virginia Select to be big, sweet, early ripening melons. You might want to try it sometime. And the Yellow Moon and Stars is one of my favorite summer melons. This is actually on the downtown, on the mall in Washington, D.C. one year when the gardener there made a hedge.
No. Oh, wait, you mean me? I'm unmute. Yes.
Oh, okay. Made this hibiscus sabdarifa, or sometimes called roselle. It's beautiful. You can make a tea out of it. You can make jam out of it. And it makes an instant hedge if you have an area that you want to make a summer hedge for one. I mean, and the leaves, I've learned, are excellent in curry. Okay, so we're going to throw in a little basic info for all of you newbies who are out in this garden today. So the first thing that I'm going to say is you don't decide where the sun shines. So if you want to have fruiting vegetables, make sure that you place your garden someplace where there's 8 hours or so at least of sunlight a day. And sometimes that can be unusual places. Craig LaHouye, the North Carolina tomato man, grows his in 5-gallon pots in his driveway because that's the only place that there's enough sun. Because we are here in really sunny Virginia, for our greens and lettuce, if we want to have it all summer, we need to get rid of some of that sun. So you want to plant those things where you have afternoon shade. And you can create it with something like planting it on the east side or the north side of some corn planting or of your trellis tomatoes. Water. Identify where you're going to get the water and how you're going to store it if you need to store it. And then how you're going to get it to the plants. And the reason you need to know that is it determines how much time it's going to take to keep it watered, how many plants you're going to plant in your garden. Soil, determine the soil type and the pH. The soil type is so that you can pick varieties. You know, when you're reading a description, good in sandy soils, you know, this Denver's half long carrots are good in clay soil. You know, pH is important because pH determines how available the nutrients that are already in your soil are. So if you, and it's really cheap to add lime and as recommended to bring your pH up, because we tend to have soils that are more on the acid side here in Virginia. So yeah. And one of the nice things as a gardener, a new gardener, you know, is almost anything that's wrong in your garden other than an insect pest or a disease can be made better by adding compost and organic matter, because you change the texture and make what nutrients you're putting in there better. It helps regulate the water flow. So keep those in mind. Here's a fun thing for those of you who are homeschooling is you can take a quart jar, fill it about half full of soil from your garden. And if you have, it's nice to take a little sample from a couple of different places and then fill the jar 3/4 full with water and shake it up. Shake it up until it's suspended, and then set it down, and it will separate. Sand separates first, and then silt, and then clay. And by the next morning, all of the clay will be settled. If you have sandy soil, the sand will filter out really quickly, and it's kind of fun with the kids. And then you know what percentage you have, and you can make decisions about what to grow accordingly. I said that composting is the thing that we think of as one most helpful thing that you can do for your garden. And it's a way to get rid of yard waste. People who are in the city can make big, what I call fall compost piles with shredded leaves. You can use a commercial compost maker, but you can also take a little corner out of the way in the garden and just make that your compost area. The University of Illinois has a big composting section, but Virginia Tech has more stuff on composting than when I first started giving these talks. And I bet that your local master gardeners have a whole selection of articles and pamphlets on composting. Okay, so building your soil, compost is one way. The other is to grow nutrients on your own. Cover crops like rye, vetch, winter wheat, all of these are good. And there are things like crowder peas that you can grow as a crop that will also add biomass. The traditional place to do the cover crops is in the winter, and this is at the end of the winter, just when we're mowing down the winter rye. And sometimes we've gotten into doing this, what we call occultation, which is putting silage tarps, just mowing down the cover crop, putting a silage top for 2 to 4 weeks, and then you just rake off the dead material that's not included, or plant directly into it. Oops. Uh-oh. Something's not going right. Oh, okay. I had a technical moment. Cool season cover crops. These are ones that you're going to plant over the winter. And forage radishes are really good. They're really a type of daikon. And what's really nice with those is that if your soil is a heavy clay, it loosens it and increases the pore structure. Spring cover crops are ones that you could plant right now, and usually that's like a white clover or something like that. You only would want to plant that if you're not going to use that area for anything except summer crops that are going to go in, more like in May, so it's a moment to grow. Buckwheat is our cover crop of choice for the summer. You don't get the kid, you only get the buckwheat. Anytime you have 5 weeks or more when an area is going to be empty during the summer, it's worth planting buckwheat if you're not going to mulch to keep that area covered. Okay, so let's assume that you have a sunny place, well-drained spot, balanced pH, you've done all your homework. There are a lot of, you're ready to go. This is like in our fall garden, and I'm probably going to refer to this a lot because many people spend a lot of energy on their spring planting, and then they think once and done. We don't think that way. We're here in Virginia. We have a long growing season, and honestly, my favorite time is the fall garden. When you're making these garden plans, one of the things that I like to think about is actually, I didn't put this up there. What do you like to eat? It is not a good plan to grow a bunch of stuff because someone said it, told you how to grow it, and nobody in your house is going to eat it. Unless, of course, your mother who doesn't live with you loves it and you're going to give it to her and get so many brownie points. That works okay too. But this chart gives you some of the things that are easy to grow in different seasons and things that are more challenging. If you're a new gardener, I suggest you only pick one challenge a year and or at least a season, and you otherwise go for the things that are easier. And you can notice, like with tomatoes that people really love, that cherry tomatoes and paste tomatoes are pretty easy, but big beefsteak tomatoes are a little bit more challenging. And make a map. If you take and measure your garden space, this will help you realize how much space they take so that you don't plan for more vegetables than you have any place to put. And timing, when we looked at that initial list, it listed the first and last frost, and these are important because those dates will help you know when to start. Like most of your summer crops, you want to start them 4 to 6 weeks before your last spring frost. Unless you're going to use, season extenders like row covers or wall of waters or something like that to help you out. And then when you're getting ready for autumn, you want to have things that are frost tender out of there and producing before your first autumn frost. But that also is the time around which you want to have your frost hardy plants big so you can be harvesting them, because they don't grow so much after the frost, but you can harvest them all winter, many. Make a notebook, because records really help you do better, and they help you remember what you surely thought you remembered that happened last month. There are also a lot of online tools. We have one here, but I'm telling you, there are more of these online garden planners every year, and they mostly, many of them have a fee. But here's the thing: you have a trial, so you can play with it, make your plan, and print it, and not use the tool unless you want to have your records stored for you from year to year and season to season. There are a lot of different ways that you can have your garden. This is one of our trial beds, and this particular area, has been set up and it has drip irrigation, which we highly recommend that you use so that you're not wasting water. And you can even run drip irrigation for a small garden from a rain barrel. And most garden centers can help you make a homemade version. Raised beds are something that most people with small gardens these days use because it helps the soil to drain, it allows you to put your organic matter where the plants are going to be and not put too much attention to the paths. And you can also, you can make the raised beds with sides, or you can just build it up like the beds we just saw. Here's some that I saw in town in Charlottesville one year, and it's really fun. They decorated them, and it allows for the garden to look pretty even when nothing is there. Make sure when you're framing them that you do not use pressure treated wood, because that has some poisonous chemicals that are not good for humans. We like to not actually make wooden sides for our gardens because we like to use our rototiller. So, you know, you have a choice. What happened? Here's some beds that are made but without permanent sides. And you can kind of see that one of the things that happens is the edges kind of go into the middle, and it means that you have to build them back up as you go along. We also suggest that mulching the paths really is a good choice. And sometimes in our areas, like where we're trying to do lettuce in the summer, we used not to do the raised beds so much, but we have come to think maybe rethink that, because raised beds with mulch work well. If you are limited in where you can grow, containers can be a really good thing. 5-gallon buckets are easily available, and they really work for tomatoes. And you can even grow them upside down. These small decorative ones are great use of found materials. But what I found when I tried to grow one in the old shoe cubby is I had to water that thing like twice a day to keep those greens going. But if you're doing a homeschooling project, it can be mighty fun. The 5-gallon buckets work equally well when they're right side up and on the ground. Here is a more fancy way of having a container garden. And that garden actually has 5-gallon buckets hiding in those baskets. So you don't have to leave them looking so country. And they have miniature fruit trees as well. Culinary herbs give you a big return. And we really like to add them because talking about dollar for dollar value in money and in fresh taste, a small, 5-foot herb pit can really give you a lot. And if you add flowers with it, not only do you get the harvest, but you also provide an area for the beneficial insects to be living in your garden and have nectar resources and a place that they can nest. This is one of my favorite attractors for evening pollinators. It's called Tina James Magic Evening Primrose. And it gives you an excuse to have a party in your garden, which hopefully by summer we will be able to invite people over and do it again. Just as twilight comes on, these primroses open very quickly, just like something untwisting, and all kinds of pollinators come, and you can have a primrose party. Yeah. And I said this, if you want to not have diseases, as my grandmother said, don't plant the same stuff in the same place all the time. Actually, crop rotation is a science, but you can do it very easily. You can look in a catalog like the Southern Exposure Catalog or most gardening books and see which plant family something is in, and put things that are in the same family together, and then that makes it easier to rotate around your garden and not have things that are subject to the same diseases in the same areas. and this might be one. Do a cover crop, plant corn and squash next, then legumes, and then cabbage family. And so that, in that case, you'd have like if you had 5 beds, that would be a 5-year rotation. It doesn't have to be, exact like that. So gather your equipment, get your potting mix ready, make sure you have your seeds. And that's something I found. People were going crazy earlier in January ordering seeds because of not being able to get the varieties they wanted last year. And if you are growing your seedlings inside, make sure they have enough light. You can use fluorescent lights, or now they have these LED plant lights too. Oh my, there I am preparing some potting mix. And that's one of the things that makes a real difference. You can buy some great soilless mixes, or you can mix your own with compost and core or peat moss. We sort of have moved toward core and away from peat moss. And you can see in those flats that you want to fill your flat or your little pot, but you want to leave a little area in the top so that when you water, there's a place for the water to gather and then seep down to fully moisten the pot.
Sub prime does not have a palace.
Okay.
She left without giving him a chance to argue.
What?
She had saved face, but he won.
Mary Ellen, please
She
mute
had been
yourself.
reminded last night of how wily Philemon was. Questioned by Bishop Henri,
Can you
he seemed to have a plausible explanation for everything dishonorable that he had
hear
done.
me?
How did he justify deserting his post at the friary
I'm sorry.
and running
I'm
away
trying
to St. John in the
this
forest?
person.
The monastery had been in danger of extinction, and the only way to save it had been to flee,
Well,
in accordance
I'll
with the
go on,
saying,
but
leave early, go far.
thank you. Sorry, I couldn't speak over that. We all know about starting seeds in the spring for our garden, but we like to have all areas full, so we keep a small segment of seedlings of greens and other things that we can pop in when something like a squash plant dies to a vine borer. And then, of course, we do a second planting of seedlings during late summer for our fall garden. Another technique that we have is seed soaking and pre-sprouting, and that's good both in the spring and in the fall. These peas are a little over sprouted, but they made a nice picture. What we do is soak them and then rinse them for 2 or 3 days until the first little tail comes out, and then plant them. And that allows us to get our peas in the ground in a warm day in February, even if it's being a little unusually cool. That also works for starting them when it's too hot. Before you put out the seedlings that you started, harden them off. That is, take them out and let them get used a few hours a day to the outside wind and direct sun if you have them under cover. And that'll have you having blossoms on your melons right away. Another thing that you have to pay attention to is weeds. And what we like to do is, as much as possible, use a hoe. And because I'm 72 now, I just don't get on my knees as well as I used to. And mulch, of course, helps that. This is my favorite tool for weeding. It's a scuffle hoe, and or stirrup hoe. If you haven't tried it, it's really great. You can stand up and just gently, while the weeds are really tiny, cut right under them and get rid of them. And then mulch right away so you don't have to do it again. And then mulching, I mentioned, but I'll mention again that it does so many things. In addition to retaining moisture, it insulates the roots so that you don't have such rapid changes in temperature. And that's especially important if you're talking about having your garden go and fall through the winter. Colder temperatures hurt more if it's a sudden jolt to your plant. And then, of course, the organic mulch, when it breaks down, it contributes nutrients and adds to the organic matter as well as controlling the weeds. And here is an area that you saw earlier with the mulch spread instead of not there. And you can see this little summer, we're going to I think those are some tomatoes transplanted into holes in the mulch. We put the mulch out and then made little places to put the plants in so that you don't have to spread the mulch around the little tiny seedlings. Now, here is what happens if you deeply mulch your paths. I took this picture at a farm in Texas where this farmer was named the Water Steward of the Year. And what they do is dig their paths 4 to 6 inches and then spread shredded leaves and various bark and other shredded up material that the city delivers to them. I don't think in most places they deliver it anymore, but you can get those mulch if you go with a truck to collect them, like in Charlottesville and many other cities. So, and after 6 to 18 months, you have this nice composted in place. It's kind of like walking on a lasagna bed. Here's another thing with covering that can really help you is this bed that is covered with this landscape fabric we prepared, but it was going to be sitting for about 3 weeks before it was time to plant garlic. So we use these pieces of landscape fabric to keep weeds from growing and to make sure that we're not going to lose any of our soil if a sudden heavy rain comes along. And some people grow directly in the landscape fabric as a mulch. Here's an area that is just where the paths and the beds are mulched with shredded leaves and wood chips. Succession planting is another one of our tools that we really like. And we have sort of 4 ways that we do it generally. One is fast crops like lettuce and radishes, bush beans. During their seasons, we plant them about once a week, and in the fall, sometimes more often, because as it's cooler when they're maturing, it takes longer for them to grow. Plants that are a little slower growing to maturity, like corn especially, and broccoli and melons, we will plant those several times. In our case, usually 3 times during the season. Some people plant them as often as once a month during the hot season. And then intercropping or relay planting, where you have 2 things, say 2 or more things, use the same area at the same time. The our main thing that we like to do a lot with is overwintered spinach and then intercrop the peas. But the Three Sisters garden is also another example. And then, of course, taking advantage of unexpected openings in the garden with seedlings that you have in hand to pop in. This is, I lost. Let's see if I can get this to go back. Okay. What? I'm losing control here. Well, with the corn, something that I want to say is you can also have several plantings by planting 2 to 4 different varieties of corn at the same time. Make sure that you have at least 3 rows of corn, though, so that you can get good pollination on the corn. Here's a picture of the spinach, and with a short snap pea, that's Sugar Ann, on a Carolina stringweave trellis. That spinach was planted in the fall and harvested lightly during the winter, and then it started growing as soon as it got warm that year in late February, and now the time that that's in is about the 1st of April, when the peas that we planted mid-February in the middle of the spinach bed is starting to produce, and then we're going to clean out that spinach bed and be done with that. And that way it saved a whole bed that you didn't have to reserve for the peas. Tomatoes, they are our favorite variety for mini gardeners, and we grow a lot of different types. Something, a way to work with your tomatoes is to plant several different varieties that have different times of maturity, and then go ahead and try that again, so that you have tomato plants that are at their height of production at different weeks throughout the summer, instead of, unless you're going to be going away and you want to grow something like aroma, where they are determinate and all get ready at one time, so that you can make sauce or salsa in a big batch. Beans are something that we're very fond of, and you can, plant them, sow beans every 2 or 3 weeks, or you can look at how they're growing. Like when the beans that you planted have their second set of true leaves, that's a good time to plant another planting. And then you stop about 60 days before the frost, so that your last plantings of bean have a chance to mature before the frost. But there are other beans than just green beans. And what we've taken to growing a lot of these days are edamame beans. Greasy beans or October beans are really whole green beans that you eat after the seeds have swollen in the pod. So you get both your vitamins and your protein in the same one. And of course, we have a long season, so we can do lima beans as well. We're going to go a little bit into the lettuce. These are 3 of our favorite winter lettuces, but we try to have lettuce every week of the year, and here's how we do it. We start out, actually, the first lettuce that we plant outside is in February, and that's and then from then on we go once a week at least. But a lot of times other people stop planting lettuce in June, but we don't. We ramp it up. In June and July, we try to plant some every day. But this isn't a lot of lettuce. We're talking about how much your family will eat. And that might be for a regular family anywhere from 4 to 6 heads, because during the summer when it's hot, you're going to harvest your lettuce young, either as young salad mix greens or as what I call juvenile lettuce, which is when it's about half the size that it would be if you let it grow to maturity. And the reason that you do that is in the heat, as the lettuce gets older, it gets a little bit more bitter. In August, you increase the regularity of planting, not just for having stuff now, but because you're starting to have something, so you'll have lettuce to harvest every week throughout the winter. And in September through the 20th or so, we plant every other day. And then the last few days, we do some every 3 days. Now, some of these are not going to come up, but we do some things to help them. One of them is plant the seedlings in the late afternoon or nightfall. And we do this in beds, in seedling side. And I'll show you what that looks like. This is the end of September, the seedling bed. And each week, one of those little rows were planted, or every 3 days, if that was the time. And then at the end of September, as you're getting rid of summer crops, you can tuck in little beds of winter lettuce. But you don't have 30 people that you have to grow for, so your rows can be quite small. Another thing that people who are new don't use, but that really makes life easier in the garden, is trellises. We make larger cages for our indeterminate, our big, either cherry tomatoes or big beefsteak tomatoes. And we make them out of concrete reinforcing wire so that they can be wider and give more air circulation space to our tomatoes. If you look over at the cattle panel, we use those arches. Oops. The cattle panel arches are nice because when you're ready to harvest, you can easily see the beans. They're just hanging there. Or if you have gourds, these are edible gourds. Again, you would harvest those when they're smaller. And in some parts of Southeast Asia and Africa, they use it as sort of a combination, a vegetable that's used like a summer squash or an okra that isn't so mucilaginous. And here are the yard-long asparagus beans that give you a real picture of how easy it is to find the beans and harvest them. And I'm going to start with like those. And those are nice because they're not as susceptible to bean beetles. So if you have a lot of trouble with bean beetles, it's another alternative. If you go into a Chinese restaurant and they have those very skinny sauteed beans, often they're asparagus beans. You can also trellis cucumbers. I've even done it with watermelons. But when you do watermelons, you have to make a little sling to hold it, or it will sometimes break the vine. Don't forget sweet potatoes. You can order sweet potato slips online, but you can also save your own sweet potatoes and start them in this way in water in a windowsill. Or you can purchase organic sweet potatoes from the market, and often they make very good slips. And it's nice to have a chance to try a lot of different varieties. Sweet potatoes aren't just good for the tubers. Sweet potato leaves are one of the alternative summer greens that you can use for braising and soups. And these sweet potatoes are being grown in a big, like 8-gallon bucket. Other summer greens that you may not have had are amaranth, or callaloo, they call it in Jamaica. and it makes a nice, good cooked summer spinach substitute. Here's an edible celosia. I like it because it is tasty even after it starts to flower. But if you want to have more small green leaves, you keep tipping it off and end up with not very many flowers, but greens over a long period in the summer. And this is red Malabar spinach. A lot of people like it because it's very ornamental, but it makes another nice, good cooked green substitute for the summer. And it's definitely something you want to grow up and not out, and keep harvesting it, because the more that you harvest it and make it branch, the more tips and small leaves you have available to harvest. Jewels of Opar is another one of these edible ornamentals. It tends to self-sow, but it's very distinctive kind of yellow-green leaves. So if you don't want them where they come up, just use that scuffle hoe and get rid of them while they're small. Mexican sour gherkins are little tiny cucurbits, and they have a distinctive flavor. The kids love them at our farm. Okay, let's go through some more tips about extending the season. Natural windbreaks and walls can add up to 10 degrees. And this is why if you ever visit England, they have all these little wall back gardens, is to take advantage of that and to create more spaces that work well with that. Coal frames, either temporary or permanent, can considerably lengthen crops both in the spring and in the fall, how early you can put them out and how late you can harvest them. And up at the top left, you can see one of the simpler things that uses two of these, both row cover, which I consider one of the miracle fabrics of our time, because they let through air and water, but they cut down on the wind chill, and they make a really big difference, especially in the cold tolerant plants, the quality that they have. I think that those hoops are made out of just PVC plastic pipe. You can also make them out of wire. You can order pre-cut pieces of wire. Down below is, actually, I showed you this bed when it was covered up with landscape fabric, but you can see it when the bed is just finished and a little bit of lime has been spread over it, but not worked in yet. It's just starting to be worked in at the back end. Here is the simplest coal frame I know. These are just 4 straw bales put together. The front piece are 1x10s that were used, but you can buy those inexpensively at Lowe's. And then 1x2s are just hammered in to hold it together. So there's virtually no construction. The tops, these were left over from a solar energy project, but you can use plastic, you can use old windows. Some people use that corrugated plastic stuff that people often have over a patio in a kind of old style homemade outside area. And you can plant directly into you can make this temporary bed over one of your garden beds, and then in the spring remove the straw bales and use them as mulch in the garden. Seed starting here is something that we use a lot. We use both the row cover and that not because we need it warmer at that time of year, because it's warm enough, thank you, but it's because it keeps the moisture over the seedlings more, and it takes away from any wind drying effects that happen in the summer. These hoops are made out of number 9 wire, or you can, as I say, buy pre-cut wire hoops that are about that size. And we have 1x2s along the side, but you can use sandbags or those little metal hoops to hold it down. And in the front is just some old window screen that's over the ceilings, again, to keep the moisture from drying out so you don't have to water as often when you're trying to start fall greens anywhere from late July through early September. Okay, moving on to things that are extending into the fall. Creasy greens are a traditional green. They grow wild in Virginia, but you can also grow them, and you plant those in August, and they're nice and green all winter, and they're related to watercress. They have a little bit of a taste like that in the winter. If you wait until it's gone more into the summer, they get more bitter. Kale and collards really are coming into their own with the local eating movement. There's so many kinds, and these will grow outside uncovered. But again, if you use row cover or have them in a cold frame, they're going to be cleaner and nicer textured. Asian mustards and tatsoi also make good winter greens. A few collards, let me tell you. Not that long ago, I met the author of a book called Collards, A Southern Tradition from Seed to Table, that was about these two cultural geographers and a USDA plant breeder who had collected over 90 different accessions or varieties of heirloom collards all throughout the Southeast. And this is just a few of them. I picked from a trial that happened at the USDA ARAC in Charleston, had to be 5 years ago, and of those varieties. And it got me going on the collard trail. I mean, I always liked them, but I didn't realize there were so many different varieties, and getting to see this trial caused me and others at Southern Exposure to work with the Seed Savers Exchange and get 60 of that 90 collected back from the USDA. And we've been growing out and making available to gardeners and to those who want to be in trials. Like we had a big nationwide trial through an online citizen science project called Seedling this last winter. And on YouTube, you can go see some of the Collard Week videos and see some of these great varieties. Even see a chef making them into everything you can imagine. Here are some other plants that do well outside, extending your fall. You know, mustards, red leaf, the southern giant curl, some arugula, and if you're going to use row covers or greenhouse, you can also keep cabbage. I had January King. I still have out in the garden now. It's probably ought to harvest it sooner. It's going to start trying to send out a flower shoot. And don't forget spinach for your winter greens. And now we're coming to the last things that we put up. Is don't forget to add garlic and perennial onions into your garlic. They're one of the last things you can plant. Between the middle of October and the middle of November is a good time. I've planted them as late as early December, and a very small area can produce a lot of garlic and perennial onions. And here's a multiplier in onion bulb. We call those yellow potato onions, but you can also have French red shallots, which are like that, but more red skinned and milder. And these are all planted in the fall. And I have a whole 4-page downloadable guide to growing garlic and onions that you can get at southernexposure.com, because I didn't have enough time left to fill in more. And here's something that we like that is kind of fun, is perennial leeks and some of the perennial green onions. And again, they can be divided in the spring, or you can also, some of them, like evergreen hardy bunching onions, you can start from seed. And if you give them more space, they'll get bigger and be more like a small regular leek. Oh, my goodness. I had a technical difficulty. Anyway, here are some resources that you can use, look at on your own. When, as they say, this is going to be up on the website. And why don't we look at this lovely picture of some varieties and some seeds while we start to answer questions.
Very good, Ira. That was a marvelous presentation and everything. And before I forget, I want to thank Devin Johnson for her technical support with Virginia Extension. So several questions come in. I summarized some of them. The first one that came in that I thought was very interesting is someone had problems with tomatoes in a container this last year and was wondering if the heat was stunting that container garden.
Well, it could be. Tomatoes need a big container. A 5-gallon bucket is the smallest container you'd want to grow a single tomato plant in. So it depends on how big they are. Container gardens need watering much more often than outside gardens. Many people, like Craig LaHoulier, who grows all those tomatoes, he has an emitter drip system. So there's one emitter for each of those 5-gallon buckets. And unless it's rained, he waters them every day that it doesn't rain, generally speaking. So it kind of depends, what their situation was. But most likely it's either not enough space for the amount of plants or not enough moisture, presuming they started out with a good potting mix.
Speaking of moisture, another question was, do you know of any veggies or vegetables that can tolerate a little bit wetter conditions that they have, or would raised beds be the best solution?
I would suggest the raised bed solution. There's, you can grow some things in a little bit more moist condition, but when you have moist conditions and then it rains, most vegetable plants are not having it.
Right. Okay, another question that came through was mushroom compost. They were wondering if they should side dress with mushroom compost every year.
Mushroom compost is usually a pretty good compost, and I think you should side dress with some kind of compost every year. Mushroom can be good. If you have different kinds of compost, then the micronutrients that we all keep finding out more, when we read about health for people, there's more and more that we don't know. So having, a different kind of compost from time to time might help take care of unknown micronutrient needs. But we get mushroom compost, but then we also get some of the leaf compost from the Panorama pay dirt made out of leaves from Charlottesville.
Good. Okay, another question was, what good soil amendments can you use to improve texture of your soil?
Organic matter, and then again, there's
Right.
more organic matter, and then again, another kind. But I mentioned, the same things that shredded leaves, then plants that are not diseased from your garden. You can turn under. You can put grass clippings in. A lot of people, will make, their compost pile, have those things. And you don't have to wait until they're fully composted if you're going to side dress them on top, because it's more like adding to the mulch. As long as they have been there long enough to have dried out and aren't like, a bunch of fresh green items.
Okay. Kind of a side question on that is, how do you deal with rodents in your compost pile? Or do you just surrender to them and let them, especially in the wintertime?
Well, making your compost pile hotter will make them not so interested. Some of my friends, the reason I put one of those rotating compost bins in is some people pay money to make a hot compost pile that's closed so they don't get rodents. It kind of depends, but I think getting some, if you have access to some animal manure to add into that, or using something like cottonseed meal or any other thing that is a high nitrogen addition, and keeping it more evenly moist will make it hotter and less attractive to the rodents.
Okay. I know this is kind of a complicated question, and I'm pretty sure you cover it in your book as well. How do you schedule sowing fall vegetables? And maybe also talk a little bit about winter sowing.
Okay, I could talk about both of those. I showed you an example of the type of thing that I have in my book, because I try to tell you each month the parts that you need. But the lettuce example was one that it's complicated. With other things like brassicas, here's a simple rule relatively simple. Look at how many days to maturity your variety has. And then there's what they call the fall effect. That is, it's getting cooler and less sun every day. So you add 2 weeks to the days to maturity of the variety for this. And then you look at the harvest period. Is this something that's harvested once and done, like a cabbage head? Or is it broccoli that you're going to that makes side shoots that you're going to want to harvest, over a month? So you add those numbers, and then that takes you back to where you are. And what that would look like, say, with broccoli and cabbage and stuff, is starting those as early as the first week in July for the ones that have longer days to maturity, because you don't need to harvest your cabbages and broccolis and stuff until about 4 weeks after the first fall frost, presuming it's not an unusual year and frost day after day after day at that time of year. So in our case, like in the book, I'll tell you to plant some broccolis and some cabbages, in early July, and then do another planting in later and July, And that way you kind of are covering your bets, whether you have an extra early or an extra late frost that year. And the same with, using that formula I said with deciding about when you're going to plant your carrots or beets or so forth. And honestly, if you look at southernexposure.com, we have one thing about what to plant in your fall garden that looks at when you can expect that vegetable to be killed by frost, which will, give you a point for this, and which things are planted, in which month in the fall. So I think getting your references and looking at that and adding it to your garden plan is a good way. And each vegetable is a little bit like that. That's why I said those early numbers that you put in the beginning of your garden book so that you can use them to refer to about frost dates.
Okay, good. Best mulches for raised beds or small beds. I know you obviously from the slides use a lot of straw, but is there anything else that you could recommend?
Shredded leaves make some of the most excellent mulch for a small area. And it's also available, but it's only available at a certain time of year. So you have to get it and put it somewhere, because I like actually using shredded leaves from the year before in the actual vegetable beds, because they will incorporate into them more easily than new leaves.
Good. I can't remember if you have in your book a list of what plants can be succession planted, although really that kind of includes all of them if you've got a long enough season.
I do have some information about that, and I also have the what to plant this month, which will let you know which things you can be replanted. And as you say, most things can be replanted, in succession at least 2 or 3 times, even if there's something like peas that it has a very limited section. You're going to have more peas if you do 2 plantings of your spring peas and then do a third fall pea planting. And you don't think of peas as a succession thing usually, but you do. There you have it.
Okay, I'm going to throw you a hard fastball here. Somebody doesn't have full sun. What can they grow?
You can grow leaves and roots. If you have, it's according. If you have 4 to 6 hours, if you have less than that, you have a problem. But with 4 to 6 hours of sun, most people can grow most leafy vegetables and many root vegetables. The only tomatoes that produce somewhat in low light like that are cherry tomatoes.
Okay, great. Okay, horse manure. When can you use it and how can you use it?
Well, horse manure is a pretty good one. It's not so strong as some others, but if you're going to put it directly in beds, you should put it in like 6 weeks before you're going to plant. It would be better to mix it in compost and compost it a little bit if you want to use it, throughout the season. Like another thing that people do with horse manure is spread it and turn it under in the beds in the fall and grow a cover crop on it, and then grow their garden crop the next spring.
Okay. Cow manure, you have to compost longer, I think.
Yeah. It's a little bit stronger and hotter, so you have to take longer.
Right.
But the trick of spreading the manure in the fall and then growing a cover crop is a good way to incorporate, any kind of manure without worrying so much about what's going to happen.
So you can put fresh cow manure on a bed and
Turn it in.
Straw or cover crop
or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, don't get carried away. We're not saying put 6 inches of manure on there.
Okay. How about fennel? Somebody wants to know if it's true that it stunts growth of other plants.
Well, fennel is a perennial. It can get kind of big, and it can, be a little bit of a hog of nutrients. But I hadn't heard that about it in otherwise than the fact that it outgrows some things.
Okay. Well, I'm running out of questions, actually, although I see some late ones coming up and I've kind of been halfway keeping up with. Somebody commented about sheep manure that can be used quickly, directly on the garden. Have you had any experience with that?
I haven't had sheep. I've grown we've had a lot of small animals, but not yet sheep. But I have heard that sheep manure is a good choice. So it probably can be used more quickly than many.
Okay. Good fallback questions. Asian greens is one of my favorites too, and I noticed you incorporated several into your presentation. Can you say some more about those? Maybe tatsoi and bok choy and those?
Well, I'll tell you, I have a bed of tatsoi that I'm still harvesting from right now that was planted in September. So that's something to say for it. And I did not even cover it. I mean, I often cover it with row cover, but it just happened to be extras that I put in the edge of my collard experiment to seed. And it's coming through like a champ. So, and the nice thing about tatsoi and bok choy and some of the close relatives is tatsoi in particular, if you're willing to plant it frequently, will make a tasty summer green as well as a winter green. It'll go to seed in the summer, so that's why you really have to succession plant it if you want to keep having it all through the heat of the summer.
How about broccoli rabe? Have you had any experience with that?
Broccoli rabe is, okay, but I think of it as a spring and fall thing. It's not really a summer thing, and it's not hardy enough here, at least in our mineral farm, to keep going all winter. It might do fine all winter in a high tunnel, or I've never devoted coal frame space to it. I've only really grown it in the spring and the fall.
Yeah, I grow broccoli rabe all winter long in a passive solar greenhouse similar to a high tunnel, and it does well. And I also found that if you plant seeds for broccoli rabe after it turns hot, then they will grow fairly well. But if you do the seeds when it's still cool, and then as soon as it gets hot, those plants will die. So I just pass that along in my experience, at least. Any other Asian vegetables that you're fond of? I noticed you mentioned Malabar spinach. It's one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, I like Malabar spinach, and like I say, I like that thing that I learned from a Korean lady about taking the very tip of it and pulling any leaves except those terminal ones off, and steaming it like you would asparagus, and that's really cute. And it also makes something nice for serving for a party. Yeah, so we like that. I like Mizuna. it's very nice in the winter, and it's, you know, you can treat it like a cut and come again variety as well. And Tokyo Bacana, have you ever grown that?
No.
It's kind of a big leaf, yellow-green one, and it's very mild, so you can substitute it for lettuce in salads when you don't have any. And it grows fast, again, so you can do many multiple plantings.
Any secrets that you use for growing Japanese cucumbers or some of the other Asian cucumbers, the long, narrow ones?
You saw that arch made out of cattle panels? They really are good for those long cucumbers, along with a lot of mulch. I think that they do better when the you know, moisture and temperature are a little bit more controlled.
Also passed up, forgot one. Somebody was talking about straw bale gardens.
I haven't done that, but I actually visited Craig LaHoyer when he was doing an experiment, and he had all kinds of crazy stuff growing in those straw bales. But I haven't actually personally experienced doing it.
I hear they dry out quickly.
I think so. He says that you need to make sure you prep the bale well, and that he had the best luck with bales that he had sitting out a while before he started the straw bale thing growing on it. So, but this is only casual conversation about somebody else's garden.
Right. Someone just asked the question about tips on starting a new rhubarb bed.
Well, rhubarb is a little tricky in Virginia, except up in the mountains. So one is finding a place where there is shade from the west or the south in the afternoon. The people I've seen with the best beds definitely, you know, they have a good amount of sun either in the morning from the north or the east, but not there. And they have high organic matter in it. And at least our experience of starting them from seed is I've done better to start them in late summer and transplant good sized seedlings into their permanent location, like in late September, and then have them, you know, so basically they have their first 6 or 8 months of growth before they have to deal with hot weather.
Someone just asked a good question, I think Samantha Provencio, about interplanting with perennials, such as raspberries or asparagus.
Well, what I have done with perennials is when I'm starting a new perennial bed, I use the space in between the plants for, you know, growing annuals. Sometimes I, you know, put things like comfrey in there that make cut and come again mulch. But I assume by the time those plants are fully grown, I'm not planting other stuff there anymore because they shade everything. At least I'm thinking about my, you know, blueberries and raspberries and blackberries. But, you know, in our herb garden, we mix it up. It's all mixed up.
Okay. Controlling animal activity in your garden. Any tips?
Yeah. Sometimes having a nice, noisy little dog is very helpful. Otherwise, we are lucky. It's not too bad because we have a lot of people on the farm walking around, and I think that really helps. We fence in our sweet corn, and we have to double fence it because those raccoons and deer, they just wait until it's just ready to harvest and come in there and have a party the night before. So, you know, we care about it, so we do a double fence.
What's the height of your fencing?
The higher one is about 6 feet, and then the lower one, which is out closer to the animals, is not very high. Maybe it's 2-strand wire, one that's kind of low down, about a foot up, and then the other is maybe 3 feet. And mostly that's set up so the deer are scared off by the doubleness of it. They don't like, their depth perception isn't so good because I don't think it's the height.
Okay, how do you fix diseased soil? Late question coming in. It's a good one.
It depends on what it is. There's some things that it takes 6-10 years to get out of there. So you find vegetables that aren't susceptible to the disease that you're having a problem with. Adding a lot of organic matter and growing cover crops really to kind of suck it out is another thing that some people recommend. I haven't done much with this, but Leah Penniman in her book, Farming While Black, she talked about, you know, working in city gardens near Boston, and they were trying to get rid of heavy metals and stuff that by growing, you know, herbs and other things that accumulated those toxins. So it kind of depends.
Okay, another question somebody just posted, flea beetles, any way other than picking the buggers off of there?
Did I say that row cover is a miracle fabric of our time?
Okay.
They're really good for flea beetles to put over stuff when it's small. It's like, especially eggplants. They like eggplants, those flea beetles. And so we keep them covered, you know, until they're bigger and have tougher leaves. Another thing that we do with eggplants is put some tanglefoot inside of a 5-gallon bucket and then go by each eggplant plant and kind of shake it a little bit over the bucket, and the flea beetles jump off and they get stuck in the tanglefoot.
Good idea. I think on our last question, somebody grew broccoli last year, but it wouldn't come to the florets. What causes this?
I don't know, too much nitrogen, maybe. Usually, if they have enough time, eventually they will head. It might be mighty small heads, but I'm not sure. But a lot of, you know, they like nitrogen, but too much nitrogen can make something grow some really big leaves before they ever do anything else.
Okay. All right, that pretty well wraps it up, I'd say. Thanks to everyone who showed up today and stayed for all the questions and everything. Really enjoyed it. Ira, you're fantastic. Everybody's praising you greatly and running out to buy your book.
A very special thanks to Ira. She is a Virginia treasure, and we hope to have her again sometime soon. If you enjoyed this video, please let us know with your questions and comments and suggestions for other videos at mastergardener@gmail.com. pwcgov.org. Thanks for listening, and we hope we'll see you again in another video.